So let's once again remind ourselves of the Prime Minister's case as to why we don't need an inquiry into, well, we used to call it grooming gangs. I think now we all call it rape gangs, or frankly, rape gangs. But let's hear what Starmer had to say yesterday. This is the government justification for not holding an inquiry.
Not once in 8 years did she stand here and say what she's just said. Not once in 8 years. They didn't act on the recommendations. They want a national inquiry. We had a national inquiry, the J inquiry, the J report. 20 recommendations, not a single one implemented. Not a single one implemented.
Well, he is right about Kemi Badenoch, who not once in her 8 years in the House of Commons, despite for 2 years being Women's Minister, did she ever mention this subject. But his justification appears to be the J inquiry, and I'll come to that in just a moment. But let's have a listen to Sarah Owens. She is the Labour Member of Parliament for Luton North, but perhaps more significantly, the chair of the Women's and Equalities Committee. Let's listen to what she had to say today in the House of Commons.
What about the group of 70,000 men in Germany that had a group that shared tips on how to rape, how to drug, how to get away with sexual assault, how to wreak revenge on women and girls? Just in Germany, 70,000 men sharing tips on that. Can we guarantee that there isn't something similar happening closer to home? Probably not.
Well, if, Sarah Owens, you're so concerned about what's happening in Germany, and earlier on in that speech, you talked about sexual assault and rape in the Congo, and you asked the question, could it be happening here? Why on earth did you go along with the Labour whip yesterday and vote against there being an inquiry? And I think the accusation of hypocrisy that hangs around much of what has been said by Labour MPs out of the last few days holds very, very strong. I think it is significant that Andy Burnham today has broken ranks and called for a limited national inquiry. And that's what we're calling for. The J report, Prime Minister, was a shotgun. It was talking about abuse of children at all different levels. What we're asking for is a rifle shot that focuses on these grooming gangs. And yes, there's no getting away from it. There is a big emphasis on particularly elements of the Pakistani community within this. That's what we want. We don't want it to take 7 years. We want it to be over in a year. But we want the victims to be able to speak, because they're the ones that were ignored. They're the ones that weren't believed by social services, by the police. They need a stage on which they can tell us the truth about what happened. And we need to know how widespread this problem was. I thought it was half a dozen northern towns. Charlie Peters, our investigative reporter, says he now has evidence of at least 50 towns in Britain where this has happened. So you tell me, folks at home, are Labour out of touch? Tweet #Farage on GB News or email farage@gbnews.com. I am joined in the studio by Lord Glasman, Labour Life peer, and Tom Pursglove, former Minister of State for Crime Policing and Fire and previously illegal immigration and various other things.
Quite a few Home Office.
Various other things in the Home Office. Lord Glasman, that speech by Sarah Owens is just quite extraordinary, isn't it?
I think so. I mean, the inability to face up to the horror that has happened in our country, systematic rape, neglect, disbelief. This needs to be exercised from the body politic. I completely agree. I think we should have a 9-month commission.
Yeah.
I think it should have powers of arrest. I think it's got to look absolutely at Pakistani gang rape, systematic abuse, and the people who have been reluctant to investigate it have got to be themselves investigated. This is not... See, you went on about the Tories were also playing politics, putting it in with an educational bill. This needs to be a very clear call from the government.
The rifle shot is what I'm talking about.
Let's call it show trials, something like that.
And do you find, as I find, that the cover-ups seem almost as obscene as the crimes because it's the trusted elements of society. It's social services. It's police. If we can't trust these people,
and it's ministers as well. I mean,
I'm going to come to him in a minute.
But this is the reality: the reluctance to fully face up to the disgusting things that have been happening in our society. There needs to be an exorcism, Nigel. You know, it needs to be. So I'm not into the. Today, just to let you know, I've heard much softer voices from Number 10 that it's a reasonable thing to have a specific inquiry. That's okay. What I'm saying is, things are on the move. I just want to share with you. Our only concern, you and I, has to be with the redemption of the lives of the victims, the exposure of the people who covered it up. That's all. This is too disgusting and too horrible to get involved in party politics on that. If the Prime Minister is moving to that position, but I don't want to call it a limited inquiry, I want to call it a real inquiry, even a Royal Commission.
A specific
thing into the systematic sexual abuse of working class girls throughout our country by predatory rape gangs. This has got to be brought out and absolutely exposed. And you're right. Anybody who was involved in saying, oh, this would destabilise community, no. This is an absolute out of order for any culture anywhere in the world.
And it's not left or right. It was very interesting yesterday. No. Very interesting seeing some of the quite left-wing websites saying this is not about... This goes way beyond left and right.
Listen, where I come from in Labour, this is totally out of order and needs to be exposed.
Tom, you know, there was a bit of party politics going on yesterday. I mean, you were, Home Office Minister. And frankly, your government too rejected the calls for a national inquiry.
Well, I think one of the marked differences is that we've had a local authority come forward on a cross-party basis to say that they want to have a government-led inquiry on this. I think that is calls that we should take very seriously. And I also think what is significant is that the work that this channel has done and others, we are seeing fresh allegations coming forward on a daily basis.
That's a fair point. That is a fair point.
And I think that it would be wrong
to
not take account of that and do something about
just to say, this is the new era. The truth has got to come out. Total respect for that.
And I agree. And I think one of the things, I watched the debate yesterday afternoon from afar, and the question that I would like to have asked many of those Labour MPs who were standing up and dismissing the case for this is, are you really confident in your heart of hearts that there isn't anything untoward here in the sense of a cover-up? And I just don't think that anybody in the House of Commons can say with certainty that that isn't the case. I think there are really genuine concerns. In fact, we are seeing new allegations come forward. Andy Burnham is a savvy politician. I think he shifts the weather on this bit as well, and he realises.
I mean, I thought the other day when I said, if they don't do a national inquiry, I will raise the money. Whatever it costs, I'll raise it, I can do it. And we'll find some independent judges. No, I mean, if the government won't do it, I'll do it. I think Starmer's going to shift on this, don't you?
Well, I think the lines have been so thin in terms of... I can't mount, thinking through the arguments that ministers would play through on this, I can't find a single credible argument to not go ahead with a public inquiry. But I was surprised at the kind of very aggressive approach that the Prime Minister took yesterday in relation to this. This has to be about the victims. I think you're right to say that.
He's using the J inquiry.
But that was broad.
And the J inquiry is 459 pages. It mentions Rotherham once. And you're right, it was very, very broad. He's going to have to shift on this, isn't he?
He certainly will. It's absolutely necessary, and it's absolutely necessary that we don't go on about the party politics on this, that there has been a reluctance to engage with the truth over 20 years. Right? This is disgracing our nation.
Is this because people can't accept that? I mean, let's remember back to 97. Let's think what Peter Mandelson and others, Tony Blair and others were saying.
I mean, the new ambassador to Washington.
Well, we'll see whether Trump wants him.
It's not up to Trump whether he has him.
Well, do you know what? In a way it is, though, isn't it?
Well, I think that would be wise to pursue that. But
But, they all talked about diversity, as if diversity for its own sake was a good thing. And we all accept diversity actually can be a very good thing, but provided it comes with a degree of integration as well. Isn't this a failure of integration of communities? Isn't it a failure of the multicultural experiment?
Absolutely. I mean, Nigel, you're more aware than most that we're now in a new era. This stuff is not going to stand anymore.
No.
So we have to understand that people were part of their era, including the Conservative government was part of its era. They were reluctant to inflame. However, there's no compromise on this. The truth of this has got to... We know that there's more coming out. Look, I've talked to people throughout the country and I've heard stories that are simply horrendous. The truth needs to come out without fear or favour.
And I think the thing is, there's been this false choice presented about having an inquiry and getting on and deliver the J recommendations. We've got to do both of those things in parallel because victims do deserve
the J
to get to the
recommendation
truth,
was
and these
not,
failings must never be repeated.
But the J report, it was not implemented. But this is a different thing, Nigel.
Yeah,
this is about
the game has changed.
A political moment of reckoning.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's got to be reckoned with is the nonsense around multiculturalism and diversity as being unqualified.
Well, I absolutely agree with you.
OK, but that's the politics that's coming.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, I've campaigned on grooming gangs since 2012. I remember an extraordinary situation in 2014 in Rotherham where a couple who were foster parents were taken off the foster register list in Rotherham because they were UKIP members. So all this terrible stuff was going on.
Nigel,
and that was how the local authority behaved. Unbelievable.
But Nigel, there are parents who went to the police who were then investigated for race. This has got to stop. We've got to have a judge-led, really specific inquiry
and as you
into
say,
this.
With powers of subpoena.
Well, with arrests and trial going on in parallel. This has got to be done with merciless justice.
It's funny, you get these occasions when Westminster and quite a bit of mainstream media, along with politicians, are just out of touch with the country. This is a vast gap, isn't it?
Well, I think you were very quick in pointing out the fact that there needed to be a real effort to get to the truth. I was on this programme last week when Chris Hope was in the chair covering, and I said I didn't think that this position would hold because it's just not justifiable to deny that of victims. There must, of course, be systemic change to prevent things like this from happening again. But you can't be sure of that unless you get to the truth and understand precisely what has happened.
What these girls say is they went to social services, they went to the police, they went to senior school teachers, and no one believed them.
It's harrowing. And actually the story that Charlie told earlier in the week on this channel about the fact that there was a police officer who turned up at a victim's home and confronted them and made them take a morning after pill. That is just staggering. Look, absolutely staggering.
This is just what happened, and it's part of this, Nigel, is that people didn't want to be rude. They didn't, so we've got to have a context where this could be spoken about fully, truthfully.
Well, I think it's coming. I think it's coming.
I
think we all feel it's coming.
I'm telling you it's coming.
Okay, there we are. On that note,